Let me tell you a story about how a single, ugly word can shatter a life you thought was perfect. That word for me was gold digger. And the man who spat it at me was the one I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. My name is Elena, and for 3 years, I built my world around Liam. He was charming, ambitious, and came from a family with what my mother would politely call old money. His world was one of country clubs, summer homes, and connections that could open any door. My world, the one I came from, was built on different things. It was built on 2 parents who worked double shifts to put me through college, on coupons, and on the quiet pride of building something from nothing. I suppose that difference was always there, humming in the background of our relationship. But in the beginning, Liam adored it. He called me his self-made woman. He said my ambition was sexy. I was a freelance graphic designer, and I was good at it. I had my own clients, my own income, my own life. I never asked him for anything. In fact, I was often the one who insisted on splitting the bill, who bought him expensive gifts for his birthday from my own hard-earned money, just to prove, to him, or maybe to myself, that I was his equal, even if our bank balances looked very different. The shift was subtle. It started after we got engaged. The beautiful, 2-carat diamond ring felt less like a promise and more like a shackle. Suddenly, his family's opinions became law. We had to use their wedding planner. We had to get married at the country club. We had to invite 200 people I'd never met. And then came the comments from Liam himself. "Are you sure you can afford a dress from that boutique, Elena?" he'd ask, his tone dripping with false concern. "My mother knows a wonderful place that offers more reasonable options." Or, when I was excitedly talking about my plan to expand my freelance business into a small agency, he'd pat my hand and say, "Sweetheart, once we're married, you won't need to work so hard. You can just manage the household, maybe do a little charity work with my mother. It'll be less stressful." I felt myself being slowly, gently erased. The ambitious, creative woman he fell in love with was being sanded down into a suitable, docile wife. I fought it. I continued to build my client list. I secretly put a deposit down on the wedding dress I loved, not the reasonable one his mother suggested. I thought I was holding my ground. The explosion happened the night before the annual Black and Gold Gala, the biggest social event of the season for his family's circle. I had spent weeks designing a stunning website for a new tech startup, and the payment, a 5-figure sum, had hit my account. Feeling triumphant and independent, I decided to buy my gown for the gala myself. I found a breathtaking, emerald green designer dress. It was expensive, yes, but I could pay for it. It was my victory dress. When I showed it to Liam, his face darkened. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice cold. "I bought it," I said, my smile faltering. "I just landed the Nexus Tech account." I wanted to celebrate. He snatched the garment bag from me. "Do you have any idea what this costs? This is a Vera Wang. You can't just go spending money like that." "Liam, it's my money," I said, my own temper rising. "I earned it." "That's what you always say," he shot back, his voice rising to a shout. "Your money. Your career. It's all a front, isn't it? A cute little hobby until you finally get your hands on what you've really been after all along." I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," he roared, his face contorted with a bitterness I had never seen before. "The ring, the wedding, the dress. You've been playing the long game, haven't you? But I see you, Elena. I see right through you. You're just a gold digger." The word hung in the air between us, toxic and final. Everything stopped. The sound of the traffic outside, the hum of the refrigerator, the beating of my own heart. I looked at this man, this stranger, and I saw the truth he had been hiding for months. He didn't see a partner. He saw a transaction. And in his mind, I was trying to get more than I was worth. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A profound, chilling calm settled over me. I slowly walked over to him, took the garment bag from his limp hand, and went to our bedroom. I didn't pack a suitcase. I pulled out my old, sturdy duffel bag from the back of the closet, the one I'd used in college, from my real life. I filled it with the things that mattered: my passport, my laptop, a few photos of my family, the simple pearl necklace my grandmother had left me, and the jeans and t-shirts I hadn't worn in years. I walked back into the living room, the duffel bag over my shoulder, the emerald green dress in its bag in my hand. Liam was still standing there, his anger now mingled with confusion. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice quieter. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice eerily steady. "You called me a gold digger. So I'm digging myself out of this hole." I slipped the diamond engagement ring from my finger. It felt cold and heavy. I placed it carefully on the glass coffee table. The click it made was the sound of a door slamming shut forever. Then I turned, and I walked out. I didn't look back. The gold digger was gone. And the moment I stepped into the elevator, the first tear finally fell. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of rage. And the fire it started would burn his perfect, privileged world to the ground. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing me in a silent, descending box. The calm that had allowed me to walk out shattered, and my entire body began to tremble. I leaned against the mirrored wall, watching a pale, shocked stranger tremble back at me. Gold digger. The word echoed, a toxic mantra. Each time it replayed, it burned away another layer of the pain, leaving behind something harder and sharper, a pure, unadulterated resolve. I didn't go to my parents. I couldn't bear their heartbroken, "I told you so" looks, even if they'd be too kind to say it. I didn't call a friend. This was a wound I needed to lick in private. I drove through the rain-slicked streets, the world a blur of neon and headlights, until I found a generic, mid-level chain hotel on the other side of the city. I paid for a week with my own credit card. The act of swiping it, of knowing I was providing for myself in this moment of utter collapse, was a small, defiant flame in the darkness. The room was beige and soulless. Perfect. There was no history here, no memories. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor and laid the emerald dress, still in its protective bag, across the single armchair. It was a symbol of everything that had just happened, of my success and his contempt for it. My phone began to vibrate. Liam. I watched his name flash on the screen, over and over, like a persistent insect. Then the text started. "Elena, come back. We need to talk. You're overreacting." It was a fight. Couples have fights. "Where are you? This is ridiculous." I didn't block him. I let the phone buzz and light up. Each notification was a reminder of his arrogance, his belief that my departure was just a tantrum he could quell. He didn't understand that he had broken something fundamental. He had not just insulted me, he had invalidated our entire relationship, reducing 3 years of love and partnership to a cynical financial transaction. After 2 hours, the tone of his messages shifted. "My mother is calling. The gala is tomorrow. What am I supposed to tell everyone? You're embarrassing me, Elena." And there it was. His true concern. Not for me, not for our relationship, but for his social standing. The performance had to go on, and I was refusing to play my part. A cold smile touched my lips for the first time. I powered off my phone. The silence was immediate and absolute. It was the most powerful thing I had felt all night. For the next 24 hours, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I ordered room service. I stared at the news on television without seeing it. I took a long, scalding shower, as if I could wash the feeling of his words off my skin. But underneath the numbness, my mind was working, processing, planning. The night of the black and gold gala, I turned my phone back on. It exploded with messages. Dozens of them. From Liam, from his mother, from his sisters, from numbers I didn't recognize. The sheer volume was staggering. I didn't read them. I opened my laptop instead and went to social media. It was a flood. There were photos of Liam at the gala, looking strained and handsome in his tuxedo. He was alone. The caption from a friend read, "So sad the future Mrs. Harrington couldn't make it tonight. Hope everything is okay. Broken heart." The comments section was a feeding frenzy of speculation. I heard she had a family emergency. Someone told me they called off the engagement. No way, his mother would never allow that. She probably just got cold feet. And then I saw it. A post from Liam's own sister, Cassandra. It was a seemingly innocent photo of the family table at the gala, with an empty chair where I was supposed to be. The caption was a masterclass in passive aggression: "Family sticks together, through thick and thin. So blessed to have such a strong, supportive unit. Hashtag family first, hashtag black and gold gala." The implication was clear. I was not family. I was the thin they were sticking through. I was the problem. A fresh wave of anger, clean and sharp, washed over me. They were controlling the narrative. They were painting me as the unstable, unreliable one, the woman who abandoned her fiancé on the night of the most important event of the season. They were protecting their brand. I was about to slam the laptop shut when a new message popped up on my screen. It wasn't on social media, it was a direct message on LinkedIn, of all places. The name made my breath catch. It was from Robert Vance. Robert Vance was a legend. He was the founder and CEO of a global boutique design firm called Apex Creative, a company whose work I had idolized for years. They were the undisputed kings of branding for luxury and tech clients. I had applied for a junior position there 2 years ago and had been gently rejected. What was he doing messaging me? With a trembling hand, I opened it. "Ms. Rossi, I saw the website you designed for Nexus Tech. Stunning work. Clean, innovative, and it increased their lead conversion by 30% in the first month. I'm impressed. I have a proposition for you, one I think you'll find interesting. Are you available for a confidential call next week?" I stared at the message, reading it again and again. Robert Vance. He had seen my work. He was impressed. And in that moment, sitting in a beige hotel room, publicly shamed by the man I was supposed to marry, a new path suddenly illuminated itself before me, bright and blazing. Revenge wasn't about screaming or destroying his things. It wasn't about telling my side of the story to his gossiping friends. True revenge would be silence. And success. A success so brilliant, so undeniable, that it would shine a spotlight on his monumental mistake for the whole world to see. I looked at the emerald dress hanging on the chair. I wouldn't be returning it. I would wear it somewhere else. Somewhere better. I typed a reply to Robert Vance, my fingers steady and sure. "Mr. Vance, thank you for reaching out. I am available and very interested in hearing your proposition." The call with Robert Vance was scheduled for Monday morning. The weekend stretched before me, an eternity. The hotel room, once a sanctuary, began to feel like a prison cell. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was filled with the ghost of Liam's voice, the echo of that ugly word. I knew I couldn't stay here, stewing in my own pain. I had to move. Not just from the hotel, but into my new reality. On Saturday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went apartment hunting for just me. No we, no us. I found a small, bright one-bedroom in a neighborhood Liam would have never considered. It was too bohemian, too full of artists and young entrepreneurs. It had exposed brick, large north-facing windows perfect for my design work, and a tiny balcony overlooking a community garden. It was the absolute antithesis of Liam's sterile, high-rise penthouse. I put down a deposit from my Nexus Tech earnings on the spot. It was the first brick in the foundation of my new life. Sunday was for purging. I drove to the storage unit where I kept the remnants of my old life. I opened the door and was hit with the scent of memories. There were boxes of photos, of trinkets from our trips, of the expensive gifts he'd given me that I'd never truly loved. I worked with a ruthless efficiency I didn't know I possessed. I didn't shed a single tear. Photos went into a shredder I'd brought. The jewelry, the expensive handbags, all of it went into a box to be sold. I was excavating Elena Rossi from the ruins of the woman Liam had tried to mold me into. The only thing I kept was a single, small box. Inside was the first gift Liam ever gave me, a single, fresh sunflower. He'd had it pressed and framed. The card had read, "Because you turned toward the light." I kept it not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder of the man I'd fallen in love with, and the man he had ultimately revealed himself to be. It was a totem to ensure I would never be fooled again. Monday morning arrived. I dressed carefully for the video call, a crisp white button-down shirt, my hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I looked professional, capable, and strong. I set up my laptop in the empty new apartment, using a bare wall as my background. It was a blank canvas, just like my future. Robert Vance's face appeared on the screen. He was in his late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a direct, no-nonsense demeanor. "Elena," he began, skipping the pleasantries. "The Nexus site is exceptional. But what I'm really interested in is the story behind it. My sources tell me you built that as a solo freelancer while planning a wedding to Liam Harrington." I felt a jolt of shock. He'd done his homework. "That's correct," I said, keeping my voice level. "The Harrington family is, well connected," he said, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. "But their world is one of old money and older ideas. The fact that you produced work this modern, this effective, while navigating that world, tells me you have a remarkable ability to focus under pressure. It tells me you're resilient." He leaned closer to his camera. "Here's my proposition. I'm launching a new, high-priority division at Apex focused on disruptive tech startups. It requires a lead designer with a fresh, relentless drive, and the backbone to tell legacy clients things they don't want to hear. I think that's you. I want you to come on board as creative director." The title hit me like a physical wave. Creative director. At Apex. It was the kind of position people worked a decade to achieve. I'm flattered, Mr. Vance," I stammered. "But my freelance business is just me. I don't have a team." "You won't need one. You'll have Apex's resources. Your portfolio is your team. Your work on Nexus proves you can think like a CEO, not just a designer. You understand branding as a business strategy, not just an aesthetic." He named a salary that made my head spin. It was triple what I made as a freelancer. "The offer includes a significant equity stake. You'll be building something you partly own." It was everything I had ever wanted. Everything I had worked for. And it was being handed to me in the ashes of my personal life. "There is, however, one condition," Robert said, his tone turning serious. "This is a high-profile role. The launch will be very public. Given your recent, personal developments, there will be media attention. The narrative will be that Liam Harrington lost a brilliant designer, and I gained one. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared for the world to see your success as the direct consequence of his failure?" I didn't need to think about it. I looked directly into the webcam, my gaze steady. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice clear and firm. "The only thing I'm not prepared for is being invisible anymore." A slow, approving smile spread across his face. "Excellent. Welcome to Apex, Elena. We'll have the contracts drawn up by the end of the day." The call ended. I sat on the floor of my empty new apartment, the silence now buzzing with potential. I had a title. I had a mission. And I had the fuel of 1,000 fires burning in my heart. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the dozens of unread messages from Liam. I didn't read them. Instead, I opened a new text window and typed a single, simple sentence. "The gold digger found a richer vein. Do not contact me again." I hit send, and then I blocked his number. The war was over before he even knew it had begun. And I had already won the first, most important battle, the one for myself. The following weeks were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Signing the contract with Apex felt less like taking a job and more like enlisting in an army, an army of innovation, with Robert Vance as my general. He was a demanding but brilliant leader, and he'd given me a mandate: build something that would make the entire industry take notice. I hired a small, fierce team of 2 young designers who were hungry to prove themselves, and we dove into the deep end. We worked out of a raw, open-plan space in Apex's headquarters, surrounded by whiteboards scrawled with ideas and prototypes pinned to the walls. The energy was electric. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued my mind, my vision, not my potential as a corporate wife. I was sleeping 4 hours a night, surviving on coffee and takeout, and I had never felt more alive. Meanwhile, the world I had left behind was beginning to crack. My text to Liam had been a final, definitive act, but it clearly hadn't been enough for him to comprehend the new reality. I started getting emails to my professional account, the one he'd found on my Apex staff page. They were a fascinating study in the stages of grief, from a man who thought he was entitled to everything. The first wave was pure, unvarnished anger. Subject: what have you done? Elena, this is a new low. Slandering me to my professional contacts? Taking a job out of spite? You're acting like a scorned child. We need to talk about this like adults. He thought Robert Vance had hired me as a personal insult to him. The arrogance was breathtaking. The second wave was bargaining, tinged with panic. Subject: our plans. You're throwing away everything we built. The wedding venue is holding the date, but they need a confirmation. My mother is asking about the china pattern. This is getting out of hand. Just come home, and we can fix this. He was still talking about china patterns. He still believed I could be summoned back to my designated role in his life, that this was all a temporary rebellion he could manage. The final wave was the most revealing: desperation. Subject: I get it now. Okay, you've made your point. You're independent. I see that. What you're doing at Apex, people are talking. It's impressive. But we're still a story, Elena. Our story isn't over. We're good together. We can be a power couple. Imagine the potential. That one, I read twice. A power couple. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't acknowledging the pain he'd caused or the vile word he'd used. He was simply reassessing my value. I was no longer the gold digger, I was a potential business asset. The sheer, transactional cynicism of it made me feel ill. I didn't reply to a single email. My silence was my weapon. But the universe, it seemed, had a flair for dramatic timing. The launch of my new division, Apex Forward, was set to coincide with IgniteCon, the year's biggest tech and design conference. Robert had secured a prime keynote slot for me. The title of my talk was deliberately simple: Disrupting the Narrative. The morning of the keynote, my team and I were doing a final run-through in the massive, empty auditorium. I was wearing a sharp, custom-tailored black suit, my armor. As we checked the microphones and the clarity of the slides, a commotion at the back of the hall caught my attention. A group of people was being led in by an event coordinator. And at the center of that group was Liam. My breath hitched. He looked older, strained. He was with colleagues, trying to look casual, but his eyes were fixed on me on the stage. He had come to see the spectacle for himself. He had come to watch his gold digger try to play with the big boys. My team fell silent, feeling the tension. One of my designers, a fiery young woman named Maya, whispered, "Elena, do you want us to ask him to leave?" I looked at Liam, at the doubt and the challenge in his eyes from across the vast room. And in that moment, every shred of lingering fear evaporated. He was just a man in an audience. I was the one on the stage. "No," I said, a slow, confident smile spreading across my face. "Let him stay. He's about to learn the price of underestimating someone." I turned my back to him, facing my team. "All right, everyone. Let's focus. We have a narrative to disrupt." The hours ticked down. The auditorium began to fill, a sea of thousands of faces. The buzz in the room was palpable. Backstage, Robert Vance gave me a firm nod. You were built for this, Elena. Now go out there and show them why. I walked out onto the stage, the lights blinding, the roar of the applause washing over me. I stood at the podium, letting the silence settle for a moment. I took a deep breath, my eyes scanning the crowd until I found him. Liam, sitting rigidly in the third row. I leaned into the microphone, my voice clear and steady, echoing through the hall. They told me I was digging for gold, I began, a slight, knowing smile on my lips. Turns out, they were right. I just had to start digging in the right place. I clicked the remote in my hand. The screen behind me lit up with 2 words, in bold, elegant typography. Within. A hush fell over the crowd. And as I launched into my keynote, I saw the color drain from Liam's face. He finally understood. The gold was never his family's money. It was me. And I had struck the mother lode. The applause that followed my keynote was a physical force, a roaring wave of validation that washed over the stage. I saw people on their feet, my team beaming from the front row, and Robert Vance giving me a rare, full-bodied nod of approval from the wings. But my eyes, for one final, fleeting second, found Liam in the third row. He wasn't clapping. He was just sitting there, a statue of stunned silence, his face a pale mask of dawning, horrifying comprehension. He had come to see me fail, and instead, he had witnessed my coronation. Backstage was a blur of handshakes, congratulations, and business cards being pressed into my hand. Journalists wanted quotes, tech founders wanted meetings, and rivals eyed me with a new, wary respect. I moved through it all with a calm I didn't know I possessed, the adrenaline a steady hum in my veins. I had done it. I had not just delivered a talk, I had launched a brand, my brand. It was later, in the quiet of the green room, that my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew instantly who it was. He must have gotten the number from an old mutual acquaintance. I saw your speech. I didn't know. I didn't know you could do that. 3 simple sentences. No apology. No admission of his cruelty. Just a stunned acknowledgement of a reality he had been blind to. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. He hadn't known. He hadn't seen the capable, ambitious woman standing right in front of him because he was too busy looking for a reflection of his own privilege. I didn't reply. His ignorance was no longer my burden to carry. The fallout from the conference was immediate and public. Industry blogs ran features with headlines like, Apex's new secret weapon, the designer Harrington let slip away, and, from society pages to tech keynote, Elena Rossi's powerful reinvention. The narrative Robert Vance had predicted was unfolding perfectly. My success was now permanently entwined with Liam's failure to see it. A few days later, I was in my new office at Apex, the city sprawled out beneath my window, when my assistant buzzed in. Elena, there's a Mrs. Eleanor Harrington here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. A cold stillness settled over me. Liam's mother. The matriarch. The architect of so much of the pressure I had been under. I had never once been alone with her. Send her in, I said, my voice even. Eleanor Harrington swept into my office like a queen surveying a newly conquered territory. She was, as always, impeccably dressed, her silver hair coiffed to perfection. But her regal composure had a hairline fracture in it today. Her eyes, usually cold and assessing, held a flicker of something I'd never seen before, urgency. Elena, she began, dispensing with any pleasantry. Eleanor, I replied, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. I remained standing, forcing her to look up at me. She remained standing as well, her posture rigid. I'll come straight to the point. This spectacle has to stop. What spectacle is that? I asked, feigning innocence. Don't play coy with me, she snapped, her voice sharp. The press. The whispers. You are making my son a laughingstock. You are making our family a topic of gossip in circles that matter. Circles that matter? I repeated, a slow smile touching my lips. You mean the circles that are now reading about me in the Wall Street Journal? Or the circles that are offering me 7 figures to consult for them? Those circles. Her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. This petty revenge has gone far enough. Name your price. What will it take for you to issue a statement? To say it was an amicable split, that you're pursuing your career, and that there are no hard feelings? We are prepared to be generous. There it was. The final, desperate play. The Harrington family checkbook. They thought they could still buy the narrative. They thought they could still buy me. I walked around my desk and stood before her, my hands resting casually in the pockets of my tailored trousers. Eleanor, I said, my voice soft but laced with steel. You can't afford me. She blinked, thrown by the directness. I beg your pardon? The woman your son called a gold digger now commands a higher price than your entire family's reputation is worth. You offered me a gilded cage, and I chose a kingdom of my own. So you can take your generosity and your checks, and you can get out of my office. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her face a frozen mask of outrage and disbelief. No one had ever spoken to her like that. I had finally, completely, broken the unspoken rules of her world. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked out, her retreat as silent and furious as her entrance. I walked back to my window, my heart pounding not with anxiety, but with a fierce, soaring triumph. I had faced down the dragon in her own den and watched her flee. The final pillar of that old world had crumbled to dust. That evening, I went back to my apartment, my real home, with its exposed brick and view of the community garden. I poured a glass of wine and stood on my tiny balcony, breathing in the cool night air. The city lights twinkled like a field of diamonds, but they weren't Liam's diamonds. They were mine. Every single one of them. The revenge was complete. But it wasn't the public acclaim or the professional success that felt the sweetest. It was the quiet knowledge that I had looked the monster in the eye, the monster of their wealth, their judgment, their condescension, and I had not flinched. I had found a fortune they could never comprehend, a fortune built not on old money, but on pure, unshakable self-worth. And no one could ever take that from me again. The silence after Eleanor Harrington left my office was more profound than any applause. It was the sound of a battle ending. I stood at my window for a long time, watching the city move below, a living, breathing entity of ambition and opportunity, my new ecosystem. The encounter had solidified something within me. The last ghost of that old life had been exorcised. There was no more anger, no more need to prove anything. There was only the quiet, thrilling work of building my future. The Apex Forward division wasn't just successful, it became a phenomenon. We weren't just winning clients, we were defining the next wave of digital branding. My team, Maya and Ben, were brilliant, and we operated with a synchronicity that felt like magic. The gold digger narrative in the press had subtly shifted into one of a self-made visionary, a story the tech world adored far more than a society scandal. I was no longer Liam Harrington's ex, I was Elena Rossi, creative director. About 6 months after the keynote, I received an invitation that made me pause. It was for the annual Innovators and Icons Gala, an event that sat at the intersection of high finance, old money, and disruptive technology. It was exactly the kind of event the Harringtons had always dominated. The invitation was addressed to me personally, as a guest of Robert Vance. It was a test, and I knew it. A chance to walk back into that world, not as an outsider trying to get in, but as a force they had to acknowledge. I knew he would be there. Liam. And I knew everyone would be watching us. The night of the gala, I stood before the floor-length mirror in my walk-in closet. I didn't reach for the emerald dress from a lifetime ago. Instead, I wore a gown of deep, midnight blue, stark and architectural in its cut. It was elegant, powerful, and utterly unforgiving. It said everything I needed it to say, I am not the woman you knew. I didn't accessorize with the Harrington diamonds, but with a single, stunning piece, a polished geode necklace that revealed a crystal-lined cavity. It was raw, beautiful, and valuable precisely because of its broken, complex interior. It was me. Robert Vance met me at the entrance, his arm offered like a proud general. "Ready?" he asked, a glint in his eye. "Born ready," I replied, and I meant it. The ballroom was a spectacle of opulence, a familiar scene from my past life. But this time, I saw it with new eyes. I saw the calculated smiles, the subtle hierarchies, the quiet desperation beneath the glitter. I was no longer intimidated. I was an anthropologist studying a fascinating, but ultimately doomed, tribe. I felt his gaze before I saw him. A prickling on the back of my neck. I turned slowly, and there he was. Liam. He was standing with a group near the champagne fountain, but he was looking directly at me. He looked older, the boyish charm sanded away by the harsh reality of the last year. There was no anger in his expression, only a deep, weary shock, as if he was seeing a ghost of a future he had carelessly obliterated. He excused himself from his group and started walking toward me. The room seemed to hush, every socialite and CEO pretending not to watch while hanging on every potential moment. "Elena," he said, stopping a few feet from me. His voice was softer than I remembered. "Liam," I acknowledged, my tone polite, neutral, the way one might address a vague acquaintance. He looked lost for a moment, his eyes taking in my dress, my necklace, the unshakable calm in my posture. "You look successful," he finally said, the words sounding foreign and inadequate on his tongue. "I am," I replied simply. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I heard about the Merck and Lowell account. Congratulations. That's a huge win." "Thank you," I said. "My team did exceptional work." An awkward silence descended. He was waiting for something, anger, tears, a scene. I gave him nothing but a placid, professional smile. "I was wrong," he blurted out, the words clearly costing him a great deal. "About everything. I see that now." I looked at him, this man who had once held my heart in his hands and had carelessly let it drop. The wound was no longer a wound, it was a lesson, neatly filed away. "I know you were," I said, my voice still calm. "But my knowing that doesn't change anything for you, Liam. It only changes things for me." The truth of that statement landed on him with visible weight. My forgiveness, my acknowledgement of his failure, was irrelevant to my happiness. I had moved to a place he could no longer reach. Just then, a well-known venture capitalist approached us, his hand extended to me. "Elena Rossi. I've been trying to get a moment with you all night. I loved your piece on post-disruptive branding. We need to talk." I turned to Liam, the picture of polite dismissal. "If you'll excuse me." I walked away on the arm of the VC, diving into a conversation about market trends and consumer psychology. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already seen everything I needed to see in his eyes, the dawning, irrevocable understanding that the greatest loss of his life hadn't been a financial one. It had been me. And I was truly, and forever, gone. I didn't stay long at the gala after my conversation with Liam. The victory had been absolute, but it was a quiet, personal one that required no audience. I made my rounds, exchanged a few more business cards, and then slipped away, the ghost of my past life having finally been laid to rest. The midnight blue gown was hung back in my closet, not as a trophy, but as just another tool in my arsenal. In the months that followed, my life settled into a new, thrilling rhythm. The success of Apex Forward was no longer a surprise, it was an expectation, one I met with a calm confidence I had earned. I hired more people, expanded our scope, and found a deep, abiding satisfaction in mentoring young designers like Maya, seeing their eyes light up with the same fire that had kept me going. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I was in my apartment, curled up on the sofa with a sketchbook. I wasn't working. I was drawing for the sheer joy of it, whimsical patterns, abstract shapes, anything that came to mind. The geode necklace lay on the coffee table beside me, catching the gray light from the window. My phone buzzed, showing a notification from a real estate app. I'd been casually looking at properties, not for investment, but for a home, a house with a yard, maybe, something permanent. I swiped the notification away and looked around my apartment. The exposed brick was now adorned with art I loved, pieces I'd chosen for myself. The shelves were filled with books I wanted to read, and photographs of my parents, my team, and a recent vacation I'd taken alone to Iceland. This space, every inch of it, was a reflection of my soul. It was whole. It was complete. I thought about Liam then, not with bitterness, but with a strange sense of gratitude. His cruelty had been the wrecking ball that shattered the gilded cage I had helped him build. Without that shattering, I might have lived my entire life in the comfortable, soul-crushing confinement of being Mrs. Liam Harrington. I would have never known the woman I was meant to be, the leader, the creator, the unshakable force. The final piece of my new life fell into place on a bright Tuesday morning. I was in a meeting with Robert Vance and the board, presenting our 5-year plan. As I laid out the vision, pointing to charts and projections, I saw it in their eyes, not just approval, but respect. I had earned my seat at the table, not through marriage or connection, but through sheer, undeniable talent and grit. After the meeting, Robert asked me to stay behind. "Elena," he said, leaning back in his chair. "That was masterful. You've built something extraordinary from the ground up. I have a proposition for you." I smiled, ready for a new challenge. "I'm listening." "I'm starting to think about my succession plan," he said, his gaze direct and serious. "I want you to be president of Apex Forward. A full partnership. Your name on the door." The air left my lungs. It was more than a title. It was a legacy. It was the ultimate validation, not just of my work, but of my journey. "Robert, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said, a genuine smile gracing his features. "You've more than earned it. You didn't just find a richer vein, Elena. You built the whole damn mine." That evening, I celebrated not at a fancy restaurant, but at my favorite neighborhood Italian place with my core team. We laughed, ate too much pasta, and toasted to our shared success. As I looked at their bright, enthusiastic faces, I felt a surge of profound contentment. This was my family. This was my kingdom. Later, I walked home alone under a canopy of stars. The city sounds a familiar, comforting symphony. I let myself into my apartment, the quiet welcoming me back. I walked over to the balcony and looked out at the glittering skyline. I didn't see Liam's world anymore. I saw my own. The journey was over. The revenge was complete. But it wasn't the partnership or the title that marked the end. It was this feeling, this deep, unshakable peace. The gold digger had not just struck it rich, she had become the source of the gold itself. She had learned that the most valuable fortune wasn't something you could find in a secret bank account or inherit from a family name. It was the strength you forge in the fire, the talent you nurture in the darkness, and the unshakable belief in your own worth. I was no longer the woman who had been called a gold digger. I was the woman who had dug deep within herself and discovered she was the treasure all along. And as I stood there, surrounded by the life I had built with my own 2 hands, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had won.